Look, let's move on to the damning news poll. And Stephen, I've already spoken about how Labor has lost ground in Victoria and New South Wales and among people aged 35 to 49. What did you make of this analysis that came out today?
Yeah, I'm not entirely surprised. I think when you look back at sort of Labor over the last sort of 20 years, or certainly since the election of Rudd in 2007, the story is always the same. Australians feel that the country has sort of plateaued. And so kind of in a kind of hopeful spirit, they'll elect Labor into government, but are invariably disappointed. And that is exactly what has happened with the Albanese government. They were elected hoping that they'd be able to do something about inflation, something about the cost of living. But the government has proven to be one of the most dysfunctional, visionless, confused governments in recent political history. It made a huge issue of the voice at a time where people were losing their houses because mortgage payments were so high, at a time where people couldn't find places to rent because of a rental crisis, at a time where people couldn't afford even a house deposit. For Albanese, the real issue was some voice to Parliament. So it's not surprising that a few years on, people are realising that Labor are not the answer, and my prediction is that Liberal will win government at the next election. But there's also no guarantee that Liberal are going to be able to solve a lot of the problems. I think they're ahead of Labor, particularly on climate and energy policy, but they're not exactly where they ought to be on that. They should be far more robustly promoting coal. But so Liberal, I would describe right now as the lepers with the most fingers. But the Labor Party has proven to be an absolute disaster, and people are going to swing back to Liberal after a Labor disaster, as they always do.
Yeah, well, it will be interesting to see what happens at the polls. Look, let's move on to the holiday chaos. And Bronte residents woke up to Christmas rubbish at the beach this year again. Now, Evelyn, why are people, and let's be honest, it's mainly backpackers here, but why are they such grubs?
Look, I think it's the infantile culture that we're fostering in Australia and many Western nations, sadly. It's complete and utter disrespect. And it goes back to, I think, that sort of state enslaved mindset where, you know, people always feel like it's somebody else's responsibility, that daddy government, type thing, It's just disgusting. You don't leave that level of trash behind for somebody else to clean up unless you have a severely inflated sense of self-entitlement, let's be honest. I hope it's not due to the local councils cutting back on public garbage bins like we've been seeing happening everywhere. I mean, I went to the pro-life rally in Sydney Hyde Park not long ago. Not only could I not find a restroom, I couldn't find a bin to put anywhere. So I hope that that's not the problem. If it is the problem,
actually put out
perhaps
more
local
bins
councils should use their funds better spent, doing things like this, particularly around the holidays, by upping, waste disposal methods and things like that, instead of, perhaps, spending millions of dollars on cultural diversity training. That's just my tip.
I think in fairness to the council, they apparently, reportedly, put out more bins. They put out extra bins because last year this has been such an issue. So I think the problem this time, for once, we can't blame the councils. I think it just is people being grubs. Look, let's move on to the US now, where Donald Trump continues to get down to business ahead of his inauguration. The president-elect has vowed to pursue the death penalty for violent crimes the day after Joe Biden commuted the death sentences of most prisoners on death row. Now, Trump posted to his platform Truth Social that he will direct the Justice Department to vigorously pursue the death penalty to protect American families and children from violent rapists, murderers, and monsters. We will be a nation of law and order again, Trump added. Now, Stephen, this might be welcome news for Americans who are sick of violent crime taking over cities like New York, who are sick of undocumented migrants. Do you think that this will go down well among voters?
Absolutely it will. I mean, voters have been wanting tougher law and order for many, many years. And we've got to be clear that we do talk about the Biden government, but in fact, it's not Biden making any of these decisions. It's a very far left cabal within the Democratic Party that is doing this, purely for ideological reasons. They have an ideological objection to the death penalty. They would say the death penalty is actually racist. They would say the whole prison system is racist. And it's just amazing that, I mean, they're doing this now because they couldn't have got away with doing anything like this earlier, because they literally are commuting sentences from death to life of people who are horrifically cruel torturers and murderers. You don't show mercy to people who have been merciless to others. I mean, if anyone is going to show mercy to those people, it's God, but it should not be the state. Now, I actually happen to think that the death penalty is fundamentally grounded in the dignity of human life. That is, that human life is so sacred, that is, innocent human life is so sacred that when it is taken in first-degree murder, the proper punishment is death. And so in actual fact, the death penalty is premised on a very good principle, the sacredness of human life. And that principle has more or less been thrown out over the last 60 years. And I would ask people, since that principle has been thrown out and people have turned against the death penalty all around the West, do we think the justice system has gotten better for victims, or has it gotten worse? And I'll just leave you with that.
Yeah, look, I grew up in Singapore and they have the death penalty there, and it's worked for them in terms of crime, that's for sure. But I know it's not very popular in Australia. Now, Steve and Evelyn, thank you both for your time tonight. That's all we have time for.